just finished talking with Sebastian here. We had an amazing conversation. The first half of the podcast is more about tapping into Sebastian's B2B marketing brain, which is a big brain of a lot of information. Really interesting for me that comes more from the B2C side to understand the complexity of that space. Second part, we're a little bit more into the product that Sebastian is building in the SaaS world right now, some of the challenges as a founder and entrepreneurship. Interesting to hear also what the VCs are talking about when it comes to this marketing AI tools. If you are into marketing, if you're into B2B marketing, I think you will learn a lot from this, and I hope that you enjoy. You will find us on all the channels out there. Cheers. Also, I said, like, when we started this podcast, I was like, let's not go and chase like views or listeners, because it's like then all of a sudden we're not podcast producers. We're like we're running a business, and this is helping with the content creation and getting people to notice us in this like sea of information, right? But I actively not looking at like the YouTube engagements or like Spotify creator and stuff like that. Obviously, you cannot, like you look a little bit and see like, okay, there's people that actually are listening, but what I'm thinking about is like, okay, if someone finds more certainty or Anders Gustafsson online, how can I make sure that they know me better? And because if I'm then interviewing interesting people, finding cool topics, then it creates a brand around that, right? And also it just makes it so much easier to have that consistency on online. But if we start looking at views and likes and stuff,
as long as you don't have to make a living doing this alone, I think it's great experience. It's great just to have conversations with people.
Exactly. No, so. And it's I have a friend that started a real estate podcast a year, like 2-3 years ago, and he said like he gave it a year. Like if I can do it a year, then and get some kind of sponsorship, that's fine. And he did, but what he said was like this just the connections that he gets from it, that is has much more than the monetary, but yeah, like we don't want to become podcasters where we all of a sudden it's like 10 things you wouldn't believe that Sebastian is saying about marketing. That's cool. But thanks for coming here today, Sebastian. You've been an entrepreneur and in the marketing game for many years. When I did my research, I saw that your LinkedIn URL is internet marketing. That's what happened there?
Well, I was pretty early on when I started doing a lot of internet marketing, online marketing, internet marketing, and it was actually a time where it was still uncertain whether or not it would be like internet marketing or online marketing or digital marketing that would be like the term going forward. So I think it's just a witness of me being very early on many of these platforms. Adopting the platforms, starting to work on the platforms, the different kinds of platforms. I also have, I think I have facebook.com/annoncering.
Okay.
I have the online optimization YouTube URL. I have so many of these short URLs and vanity URLs on different kinds of media because I was pretty early on. I also have, I think I own around 50, 60 domains.
Do you buy the domain first and then create the business, or do you think you have the business and then buy the domain?
I get an idea, I get the concept, I early start brainstorming names, I figure out whether or not they are available on domains, and then I pretty quickly buy the domain, and then I might find out afterwards it wasn't the right name, but then I like the name.
Yeah.
Then I keep the name.
You've been in the game for many years now. Like what is it that you're excited about now, like in the marketing space?
I think it is kind of like the same I've been excited about for many years, but there's actually a really interesting output that has been recently available to the majority of people. For instance, using ChatGPT, OpenAI, other kinds of AI. For many years, what I've really found interesting is to uncode decision processes. Why do people do what people do? And how can we affect any kind of decision in people's decision-making process? And much of also where you and I know each other from Salesforce, there's been many years where we've had a need for technology, because we needed technology foundation to actually support much of this communication at scale. We've also worked a lot on the data part to actually figuring out who are people, what are their needs, what's their behavior. But the actual communication, the actual services, the actual conversation that needs to take place for the technology and the data to work has always been a challenge. For most of the companies I've worked with, the challenge was actually scaling the conversation when you had your technology, when you had your data. And I think that is, that is part of what is the really interesting part now, is that we actually have some engines now that helps us do what actually matters, the conversation, a conversation with people. So that is what I spend most of my time with right now, and that's what I think is super, super interesting in the space currently.
So the conversations are needed to form the messaging to get people to do what they do. Like, you want to influence them to probably get to know your brand more, or convert, or something like that. And that's what you're saying, that's how to get that conversation at scale is what's been a challenge before.
Yeah,
you had the technology to maybe send a lot of emails, or publish a lot of things, but you didn't have enough copywriters, so you didn't have enough people on staff to do that.
Yes, part of it, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Also, and that's a broader discussion. We can start it, but we don't necessarily have to go all the way down the road right now. But part of what is really interesting about using these technologies is not being able to scale communication. It's being able to actually figure out what is needed of communication. What is the need of the people that you want to sell something to? What's their behavior? What are their pains? What are their gains? How can I support that? And that is part of what many companies really need to start focusing on, actually understanding the customer, being customer-centric. That is the core of being customer-centric. It's understanding the customer. And then having the option to actually create all the content that is now needed to support those needs, those customers. I think if we step back a little, you can actually, I normally love the analogy, and I use this when I do presentations and I have, show slide decks. I normally go back in time and tell the story about, back in the days where you had a merchant in a small city. They knew their customers. All the customers coming into the door, they knew them. They had been serving them for maybe decades. So they knew what their needs were, their family, what they needed from the shelves. And that one-to-one relationship is what we're actually trying to replicate in a larger scale. Just the normal conversation between two people. You trust me, I trust you, you have some needs, I'm a merchant, I can support you somehow in those needs. That has been, the core of selling and creating a customer relationship for many years. But it has become very difficult because of digitalization, because now you don't have the relationship anymore. People is behind the screen, and suddenly there are so many people that you need to have a conversation with. So it's impossible to be creating the actual customer relationship, which, for instance, is, something that Salesforce has built on the CRM, creating a customer relationship. It's good in a system. It works in a system. You have my name, you have my other kinds of dimensions, my age, my company account, something like that, but you don't have a relationship. So it's more customer management system. It's not a customer relationship management system. And I think the relationship is what is actually coming in now, that you're actually able to create a relationship, because relationships are created by conversations and by relations. And that conversation has been very difficult to do previously, because you had the technology, you might have the data, but you didn't actually have the conversation. You didn't have the resources needed to create all those conversations that were needed.
Because you need to tailor each of the conversation to the individual. But this is where I feel the friction, right? Because it feels a little bit, I don't know if it's counterintuitive that you're now then trying to create a relationship by outsourcing this to someone who is a computer. Like, it's like, it's just, maybe I feel a little bit old-fashioned there. Like, you understand where I'm coming from? Like, now we're going to have a one-to-one relationship by increasing the amount of conversations that is not, like, I'm not taking the time to get to know you. I am, like, trying to send you so many messages that one of the messages is fitting you and is also fitting all the other, buying personas that I have in my ICP. You know where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
What are you thinking when I say that?
I think that a good salesperson, in my opinion, is a person that is good to uncode the conversation that we're having, to understand your needs, to understand, where you're coming from, what's actually the pain point here. How can I actually support that? And a good salesperson actually just, takes that, reflects on it, puts it back to you with a solution. And it's kind of like the same when you use generative AI, Gen AI, Open AI, ChatGPT. It just simulates that it understands the conversation, and it then predicts what words would probably be best in what order. And that is kind of like the same that a good salesperson does, understanding the conversation we're having, and then quickly understanding how can I support that with my product, product market fit, so that you say, yes, that is actually, it relates to my current pain, my challenge I'm trying to solve. He understands, because there are many other people that don't understand. You have a problem, I just want to sell you something, so I'm trying to sell you it, but I'm not meeting your needs. I'm not understanding the conversation. There are plenty of those salespeople.
Yeah.
But the good salesperson understands your background, your needs, your challenges, your pains, and how the product relates to that. And I think that is part of, as I say, what an AI does. It is predicts words, and the more you feed it with the right backgrounds, the better it is at predicting the words that you actually want to listen to. That creates the relevancy, and that will build a relationship, and that will build trust, and that will create a better impact in the communication you can have between two people.
When you're talking about this, which channels are you focusing on the most? When you think about the LLM AI tools that is like generating this next best sequence of words towards that end user, or maybe not a user but a consumer, or whatever you want to call them. Like, is it social media? Is it emails? Is it where are you putting this content?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not sure we established this. I think it's important to just understand that I really work in many B2B relationships, complex decision processes, often within industrials, manufacturing, pharma, life science, often also on a global scale. So I think that the channels here are still really much email. Email is still number one channel in a B2B relationship. Personal relationships is really good. That is why also, most of these manufacturers, most of these global companies, they still spend a lot of money and effort on doing events to actually meet people. That's where you create most of the good deals. But email is a really effective channel still, even though many say, okay, it's super old, and it if you just communicate more, it might be spamish. But I think the right email is still super important and still really value creating is also what I can see from the work that we do. It's really value creating when it's relevant. I think also social media is a really good channel, depending on who your audience are. But I think, for instance, LinkedIn is a really valuable channel, which has also become more of a more broadly adopted social media for many people, I guess. You can probably use that B2B content also on TikTok, also on Facebook, or whatever, wherever you wanted to use it. But LinkedIn is beautiful because of the targeting options you have and actually creating a good and relevant conversation with your ideal customer profile, your target audience.
I want to dig into that eventually. But before we move on from this, I think that like where I have a little bit of a challenge right now, it's because like I'm building my business, like I want to be good at email marketing because I know that it works. Like I have seen that throughout my career. I also see that it works on me. Like I have one LinkedIn sales guy that is I say he's not from LinkedIn, but he's very active on LinkedIn, and he sells his courses and stuff, and I can tell that he's now almost wearing me down, and I'm not like both in a good way and in a bad way, because like there's so many emails that he sends. Most of them are pretty good, like they're like, and I'm like, he's coming with value. The only reason why I'm like not liking is maybe the frequency is a little bit too high for me. But I have already put a post-it note on my, for something I need to do later is to maybe have a meeting with him. And so I can see that, I got 5-6 emails. I opened 2 and then I got 2 more, and then I actually sent him a message, so it does convert. But this is where I am having a little bit of the, I also know that sequencing when you're calling, you do outreach, outbound, to have emails is super important. Like I do that myself. I do sequencing, but that again, it's like there's this gain of speed of like having the AI potentially doing something for you, and then the quality of it. And I have a hard time articulating what the challenge for me here is, but it's like,
I can actually I can tell you what the challenge is.
yeah.
The challenge is he doesn't understand your behavior. He's not catching your behavior, and he's not using that data and that behavior to modify, for instance, his frequency. So right now, he's a person, he has something to sell you, and he's just communicating all the time. Buy my product, maybe not buy my product, maybe, these are the 10 reasons you should really blah, blah, blah. These are how everyone else is doing, all the tricks. But he's communicating one way. And the beauty part of the technology we have available today and the data we have available today is that if you are customer-centric, you're actually using that data to also be data-driven, to also interpret what's your behavior? Have you visited the website? Have you, clicked through an email? Have you seen a LinkedIn video? Are you collecting those data points and using them in your continual conversation? That's when you become really data-driven, really customer-centric. And I think it's very few companies that are actually there, because the workload in doing that, the complexity in doing that is huge, and especially creating all the content to then serve based on the data that you get is huge. Which is why most think, okay, now I have an email automation system. Now I have received your lead, and I will just send you sequences.
Yeah.
And sequences doesn't take my behavior into consideration. It's just sequences you have set up to keep posting something for me every day, every fourth day.
Exactly.
Something like this, right?
And that's exactly what that is what I'm feeling, Sebastian. Because it's also like when in the sales part of it, like I know that having multi-channel approach is, the data shows that the more if I engage on email, LinkedIn, and phone, like I have a higher likelihood of booking the meeting on the phone. Like they have a little bit of a, oh yeah, Anders Gustafsson, I've seen that name. Like they, like yes, he was the one that engaged with me on my comment on LinkedIn. Oh yes, he did send me that email. Like there. But what I have a challenge with is that I don't have the data or the capacity also to spend too much time on this sequencing. So I have this, the conflict that I know that it works, but I don't want to send, just gonna bump this email in your inbox because I hate bumping but it kind of works. So it's like this is not this is not the brand I want to be, but it's the shortcut to get the the client. Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Like so how do you see that conflict? How do you address those things? Because you don't want to be the bumping up the email guy. That's
I think what is challenging with some of the companies I work with is actually replicating what you do, and our approach to it is even more mature than what you do. But what you do is right, and I know you also, so I know that you're well schooled also in sales tactics. But the things you do, the commenting on LinkedIn, doing podcasts, creating content, creating something that is relevant for your audience to listen to, calling people, that is something that most big companies don't do in one person. They make it in very different, functions, not really well coordinated, and they don't follow the output as such as one person like you could do. So I think it sounds like you're doing a lot of the right things, and this is what is difficult to replicate in big companies, and then put on top of that even more understanding on customer behavior. Even more, because that is if you want as a big company to do this on a global scale, you need technology, you need data, to, in a broader perspective, understand customer behaviors, because you're not able to do what you do one person as a big company in 65 countries, 65 markets. So you need to systemize this even more, and then you need to pick up more data from when have someone seen something 20 seconds on LinkedIn, put them in this segment. When have they actually clicked the LinkedIn link, put them in that section. When have they, received an email, clicked through it, looked at a landing page, put them in this section. And then that is why when you look at your B2B marketing systems, they normally have this, lead scoring, lead grading, which is kind of like a logic where you build a static logic to figure out when people have points, you move them in a funnel. And that is a gift, but it's also like a challenge because it really doesn't work for many people. But that is part of how to work with being data-driven in a B2B marketing context.
Why doesn't it work what do you mean by it doesn't work for a lot of people?
So many of these B2B marketing automation systems are built primarily on lead scoring, lead grading, which is, there are different kinds of marketing automation systems, like marketing automation system for B2C is primarily built on high volume transactions, many emails, offers every day, maybe a little smarter in predicting when do you buy, which brands do you like, which colors do you like. That is one part of the marketing automation system ecosphere. The other part on the B2B side is actually more like a lead management system than a marketing automation system. And they have lead scoring and lead grading. And those were originally developed to try and, point you in a point system to push it through a sales funnel. But the challenge is that it's first of all, all these engines come empty, so there is not a real way of doing things. You have to figure out how to do this from company case to company case. There is no one way of doing point systems. First of all, you need to take into consideration a topic we haven't spoken that much about, but there's an entire life cycle you need to take into consideration. It's not just about getting customers. It's also about people that are in a sales process. It's also about people that already are customers. So figuring out who am I working with here and developing the point systems for supporting the decision process throughout all of this customer life cycle. That's hugely complex.
Yeah.
It doesn't take buying groups into considerations. There's a lot of things it doesn't take into consideration. So that is why the CRM lead management marketing automation systems are based on lead scoring, but lead scoring doesn't really work.
Because that was also always like the case when I was talking about marketing automation for B2B, it was like a little bit like, I want the lead score. But then when you start digging into it, it was like maybe hard to even determine what they were going to do with that. Because like in reality, most of the time they just wanted to know when to call them. Like that was and as you said, that the term depended a lot on the companies and buying cycles and all that. It feels like if you're a big enterprise in 65 markets, the challenge might be that you have too much data then, like that you have too much data that isn't structured, or like, so for a big company like big enterprise company, where should they start to like they have some systems in place? Obviously they wouldn't have grown that big if they don't have these systems, but
they have grown that big without systems.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, many of them,
That's what I love about business. You don't care which company you look into. Everything is a shit show. Like it's
at least from our perspective in terms of marketing maturity.
Yeah,
it is actually often a shit show.
Yeah,
and it amazes me also that, and then it brings me back to some of the previous conversations here. It is based on people that actually sell. There's so many salespeople that have a relationship. Kurt on 48, who just knows his clientele and picks up the phone, talks to them, sells trucks to them, and that is the relationship that pushes out some trucks for a trucking company. It's not having huge demand generation systems, lead generation systems, lead management systems, CRM systems, because many of these companies, the people actually don't really use the CRM systems yet. They're not mature enough yet. It also depends kind of like on the industry, because some of the industries I refer to are not that mature in their digital transformation. Some industries are really mature. If you look at the B2B SaaS, for instance, software as a service applications, that is a pretty mature marketing ecosystem industry. So some industries are really mature, some industries are not mature. But it's amazing to see when you look at some of these companies, how much they actually sell without having marketing, without having really mature marketing.
So what is the first thing that you would do when I am a big enterprise truck company. I have let's say that I have good data. I have I have a CRM. I have a lot of data. Some of it's structured, some of it's not. We have just consolidated actually, so we don't have this fragmented CRM. We have everyone in one. Everyone is on Dynamics now. Everybody's happy. What is the first thing you do?
First off, I haven't seen many global enterprise companies that are in that situation that you're mentioning. They're all struggling. They're struggling with consolidating many different systems because, 40 markets had different systems.
Yeah.
They are working on consolidating it, so they all have one strategies. They have one CRM. They have one this, one that strategy to try and consolidate things. So I think that is ongoing in many big organizations right now, trying to consolidate a lot of different systems. And when they are at least working on consolidating that, part of the challenge that I see is still just basically the global operations. How do we align a lot of people to do, to follow like a vision, a marketing mission, one way of working, or at least similar ways of working? How do we bring the value from marketing to the business? That's also a big challenge we see, because it's still many broken organizations here where people are not talking together. So marketing doesn't really contribute to sales. At least it's difficult for sales to see and report on, which is also why marketing are not getting the resources that are actually needed to really be positioned. So I think when I start working with some of the companies I work with, we normally look at obviously the maturity. What kind of, how are you actually able to ensure that your technology talks together, that your data flows, and that you're able to use that data to create any kind of relevant conversation. But then we normally use two expressions where I normally say, where is the value and where is the volume? And those two kind of predicts, or at least points to, where should we put our efforts? Because as I spoke about previously here about the customer life cycle, when starting in the marketing transformation, in the digital transformation for marketing with implementing a lot of these enterprise marketing systems, you could either focus on getting more customers or on your existing customers, selling more to existing customers, supporting existing customers. And again, there's a really broad spectrum in the customer life cycle. And I normally say, let's look at where is the volume and where is the value in this. So looking at your customer life cycle, would it be more feasible to look at your customer database because we could actually sell 5% more to those customers? Or do we really need new customers and focus on new customers at all times, So that depends on how it supports the business.
It's I guess it also depends on where in that chapter of that company is, right? Because you kind of always need to have some type of new acquisition in order to grow the way you want to grow. But if you also haven't, if it's an untapped, if you haven't looked into your customer base for years and you haven't put in efforts to upsell them, then there's like that's probably like some low hanging fruits there, right? Okay, so complexity is is a key word. What about if you're say a scale up, and you haven't built yourself into bad habits yet? Like, what would you say that like a scale up companies should? What type of foundation should they put in place, or what should they think about to not, when they become the 40 markets big, enterprise, to actually like, okay, we're now are able to have a highly functioning marketing department where we communicate well with sales and we can measure everything and attribute this is it a possibility at all to have an organization like that?
Again, I think it depends a lot about also the product that you sell. Do you have to sell something new at all times? Or do you really need to ensure that you increase your customer lifetime value? So again, depends on the product, but I guess for many scale-ups, the challenge is to actually then replicate and scale what works, because you found something that worked. You may have found your ideal customer profile or profiles, and now you're starting to scale your efforts to reach these and to communicate with these. And then at some point, depending on what kind of scale up you are, you figure out, okay, so, that is our service obtainable market. What is our addressable market? How do we actually scale up to that? Okay, now we need to talk to people that don't necessarily have a need right now. And then the challenge starts, because then you need to talk to a lot of people where you're not sure they actually have a need, or at least for, where in the decision process they are. Is it a 12-month decision process and they have just started week one? Then you're sitting here and wondering why doesn't it work? What I'm doing, when I'm positioning, when I'm communicating something that should be relevant for these people, but the decision process is 12 months, and you have just reached someone in week one. So it will work, but in 52 weeks, you will start to see the results. And I think that is part of the complexity, is that you start addressing to an audience that is not sales ready, and that's difficult to navigate in. I think also another challenge, which again depends on the kind of the company that the organization that we're looking into, the operating model. If we're looking into a company where there's a decentralized operating model, meaning that someone is sitting in the US, someone is sitting in France, someone is sitting in Germany, then you have a huge change management, huge leadership work ahead of you to also ensure a unified way of working and valuable ways of working, where it's a bit easier if you're a more centralized operating model, where like you have a Danish headquarter or US based headquarter and you're doing everything centralized. And then it comes down to what kind of operating model will create the right drive that you need to unfold all the options, all the possibilities that you can work with.
So is it that a lot of companies are kind of like not intentional in the way that they are, creating their departments, or, creating, their vision, that it's like almost as a, oh shit, yeah, we need to have this, and then they run, like one of my friends was asking his clients, like, what's your KPI? And he was shocked to hear that a lot of them didn't have KPIs, like, or like it was just, yeah, it's depending on the software's uptime, but he doesn't have any impact on that, right? So like, and then my friend's conclusion was like, well, if you don't have a KPI that your managers is holding you accountable to, you're replaceable. You're not actually that valuable. And it's like, for me it sounds very, I'm getting worried, like when I hear this, that and from a founder perspective, I'm like, okay, how can I make sure that I don't end up in that situation? Like, how, like I don't want to. I would rather take measures in the beginning to ensure that I don't paint myself into a corner than being in the corner and then try to fix it. Do you know what I'm getting at? So like, where should I? And I'm too small yet, but like in a couple of years' time, where should, as a founder that is scaling, and like, where is it then? Is it a vision that is needed? Do I, like, is it, and it's where, and vision, and like a person that has done this before, or?
I think you're touching upon the right thing here. So it's many of the things I have seen that actually work. If when there's someone with a strong vision and great ambitions, and that actually understands to communicate how that relates to business. So if you tie these things, I want to position us here. I want to communicate that. I want to do all of these things because we need to sell more. I can scale sales. Sales pays the bills by the end of the day, right? So I think in all the great collaborations I've had, it was born by and carried by someone with a very strong vision, and an understanding on bridging that vision to business, and argumenting, showcasing how what we do creates business, showcasing that business. That's where I've seen things work. and also, drowned with when those people are not in the organization anymore, because it's really difficult to carry on someone else's vision. I've seen many great cases with many award-winning big customer cases that were carried by a visionary leader and then drowned as soon as that leader stopped in the organization.
It's also like, I think marketing has been, marketing is still kind of a new department. Like if you, it's just maybe in the last, go back 15 years, in the Nordics, there was only like H&M and IKEA that had a CMO. And if you ran into a CMO in a scale up, like it was more of like a here you go title. Like it was, they didn't sit at the table actually, or they were just having a C-level title to shut them up. And then in the last 8 years ish, you've seen like now it's a data-driven CMO. Like it's it's much more of a like, how can we attribute what we're doing so the CFO actually understands what we're coming from. Like it's
I think you're still in really mature companies.
I mean, mature companies.
Yeah. But because I'm not seeing that in most of the companies that I work with, because they are not digitally mature. It's still very difficult for many of these clients that I work with to attribute any kind of marketing activities to actual sales revenue. And you would be surprised if you knew how few actually marketing activities that are tied to sales, that are tied where a CRM is connected to a marketing automation system.
Yeah,
it's very few places that actually have this in global enterprises, because the complexity is huge.
I'm like I've been in the Salesforce bubble, and yeah, I can't say this. I was like, I was just thinking if I'm getting into trouble if I say this, but if you looked at the companies that I sold to and my team sold to, and in the beginning I was only with Marketing Cloud. You would have a good stock portfolio if you just invested in those companies that also bought Salesforce Marketing Cloud, because it was just, and I guess maybe there's a higher, because the companies that bought Salesforce Marketing Cloud were digitally mature, so they did have these conversations about how to attribute. So, I guess I'm a little bit biased by having worked with those companies there.
Yeah, definitely you are, because many of the companies that you used to work with in Salesforce, and that normally would be the ideal customer profile for Salesforce Marketing Cloud engagement, those are often local global commerce retailers, players like that.
Yeah.
That actually have high frequency of communication and short sales cycles, and are able to measure much of this on their commerce, in their analytics.
Yeah.
So they actually measure, did they send out, we have this and that revenue coming out. I know some of these big online e-commerces we've been working with previously, myself, 2/3 of their revenue is from their database. And it's like the oldest saying in doing marketing automation is the gold is in the list, so you're really able to harvest your list and make a lot of money on that list. But and that works for many of the companies you've been working with, as I say, the local global retailers, e-commerces. It's completely different when you look at B2B marketing, and especially global enterprises, because
and it's almost like you turn the funnel at 90 degrees, right? Because it's like because in the B2C side, just more people top of funnel, and eventually you will have such you will convert. It's like, but the B2B is almost like a time. If the x-axis, then it's like the timeline. They're interested, but it doesn't matter how many you push into the side, because they still have to go through the steps in order, because this will not be a buying event until 5 years from now, or in 20 years, because that's when the machine needs to be replaced. Like it's can be So it's okay. I get that.
Exactly. That's also part of why I find it really interesting to work with B2B marketing and then, complex sales cycles. It's because there is the timeline that you're talking about, and the timeline is way more stretched than in, many of the day-to-day needs that we have as, normal people. And when we buy books and when we buy makeup and when we buy, washing dishwashers, whatever. When you look at B2B marketing, it's completely different because the timeline is super stretched. And also the resolution on understanding the person and the decision process is less granular. It's more pixelated. A decision process for buying heat exchangers for an oil tanker, that follows a more strict set of rules than when you're in, when you need a new iPhone. So that's what I really find interesting, is tapping into that decision process, that timeline of buying something complex that could take 5 years. How does that decision process look like? How many stakeholders is part of that? How does that, like, request for information, request for proposal, all that sales cycle, how does it look like? How can we uncode it? And then how can we tap into that decision process?
Because
that's what I really find interesting.
Because if I think about this, then like from a B2B perspective, then I know that today in a complex sales cycle, you will have minimum 12 stakeholders. Like that's Gartner came out with that report, and sometimes over 20. And what I would want in like my B2B marketing tool, I would then want it to like map those things out, like so it could help me determining risk. Because I'm not expecting the marketing emails to close the deal for me. I just want it to enhance the likelihood of conversion. So okay, the salespeople have engaged with five stakeholders. We know that we should probably have double that. What has marketing done to reach these people? Have they reached those people? That's how I would want to look at it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's when we work with complex enterprise companies, part of what we bring is that we bring a structured overview on the phases in the decision process. What phases do you go from being unaware of some kind of product to having bought it, to being an ambassador? How does those phases look like? How can we sketch up those phases? And how can we uncode what is needed in the different phases? In some phase, there's a decision process, there's a decision maker, he needs presentation material to his stakeholders. Either he finds that information himself, or you already know that at this point he needs this and that information, and you bring that information to him so he can present to his decision process, to his decision makers, what he needs to present at that given moment. So part of it is actually giving an overview of the phases you go through as a buyer in a complex sales cycle. Another part, which is also the different layers of dimensions here, is that, as you correctly state here, there are many different stakeholders, and they have different pains and gains. They have different needs. They have different focus areas. The CFO looks at visibility, efficiency, many other things. Cost, return on investment. Someone looks at function. Someone looks at risk. Someone looks at there are many different things they look at. So one thing is defining your phases. Another thing is defining those phases for each of the stakeholders. And then you get the picture of what do I actually need to communicate to these 8 different people, depending on where they are in the decision process. And then you have 648 pieces of content that you need to being able to communicate. And this is where the complexity comes in, because most companies don't have the resources to create all that content in a decision process, to support the decision process to all different stakeholders. And this brings me back to where, things are getting really interesting right now, is that now we actually have the tools to create that amount of content. And now I say 200 and something, I don't know, 256. I think I just did a calculation yesterday for another client. We would actually need to have 1.2 million pieces of content to support, with real relevant communication at different points in time for different stakeholders, depending on where they were in the decision process.
Because
sorry, Anders, and then on top of that, if you're global, you can add countries, translation. That's where I state the complexity is huge, and that's where it really becomes interesting now to use some of the new technologies that can create all of that content, structure it, and put it in the machine.
It's super cool. Jesus, I almost spilled out the water here. Could have gotten expensive. It's super cool because it's like what an amazing topic to nerd out on. And I'm coming from the sales brain, it kicks in here, right? So I'm thinking, okay, I have my ICP. I now have defined my buying persona. These are the stakeholders. Then I know I have my deal stages, and you should have mapped your deal stages to how you sell your not just, HubSpot, the Salesforce, whatever they roll out. What is it that is needed for your product to map your selling motion to the company's buying motion?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're then looking at, okay, in this sales process, I also have what is my communication strategy towards those stakeholders in these sales cycles? And then the different levels of engagement per stakeholder then determines if this is have they never seen anything of our product before? Then they should probably have, did you know that this is a problem for a lot of companies, or people in your situation? Till I am almost a champion, I'm ready to sell this internally, then it could be maybe, oh, have you seen that Forrester has ranked us as this? Or, that's the work that needs to be done. That's a lot of work. Let's say that what's the Pareto rule here? Like, if you can only do the simplest thing, where should you focus your efforts? Just gather the data until you have enough budget to hire a consultancy like yourself, or buy your new tool, or where should you go if you're a scale up?
It's a really good question, Anders. Difficult. Again, I would point to volume and value and look at where is the most broken part of the funnel. Where can I identify the most value to be created if I fill in those gaps? So, do you get a lot of requests, but you don't have the capacity to bridge those requests to demos or to sales? Is that part of the process where you really need some support? Is it because you're not getting enough leads? Is it that you're not retaining your customers for the extended period that you need to how do you say is it that you're not what the fuck? Sorry.
That's fine.
Resubscribing. Is it that you're not resubscribing your existing customer database? So again, I would say that depends on where can you identify the volume, where can you identify the volume and the value. So there's no golden rule.
No, which makes it so hard, right? It's but I get that. It's like you have to identify where is the weakest link in your chain.
Where's the weakest link? Where's the biggest drop off? Where's the most value to be created?
Yeah, I've tried, and I've been starting my business now for 2 years we've been incorporated. I wouldn't say that I've worked hard for 2 years, but we've been incorporated for 2 years soon. And we started with Google Ads, for example, like, because everybody's just like, what an amazing business, by the way, Google Ads is. I wish I had that one, just pouring money in and not like I didn't get any return on that. And I hired agency to do it. They couldn't do it. Like, where, like you've been doing this in the different platforms for a long time, and you've talked about LinkedIn, and you've like, what's your, like, to generate more leads, for example, on this platform? What would you do if because I tried with doing very specific. First I did it myself, then I was like, okay, this is not working, so now I'm hiring an agency. This guy had like lots of good use cases and had definitely delivered results for other clients, just not for me. Try to narrow it down, try to be specific, didn't work either on my procurement business nor on my SaaS business. And I don't, it's clearly not, it works for many companies. So it's, it must be me, not the Google.
I think there's many companies that spend, 95% of budgets on something they shouldn't spend the thing on budgets on. But so what I was born out of search. I was born with search marketing. My initial steps with marketing was with as one of the first working with search marketing, at least in Denmark. And what I quickly found out, which is what have brought me to what I do today, is that search is super interesting because it taps into the brain. It taps into your behavior. You search for your needs. And what I found on early on is that, all these different search terms that you use throughout your buying journey are different, and you're able to uncode these. And most companies don't understand the timeline in this. So they have campaigns that are built up to, just be present, be positioned when someone uses a search term where you think, here, I might be able to sell something. Then you have your ad because I'm searching for this, then there's an ad, and then you expect people to say, oh, okay, I'm buying this. But what you don't realize is that your ad leads to something that doesn't cater that specific point in time of need you have. So even though you have uncoded somehow in your keyword analysis that these keywords are relevant for you and your business, you haven't done the structural work where you need the conversation to happen, where you need the content to be super specific for that specific keyword. I can give you an example which early on, like 18 years ago, was like an epiphany to me. I worked with selling anti-spam for a company called Spam Fighter. Back in the days, we were 5 people sitting in a basement selling anti-spam globally. Super interesting. I found out early on that when people searched for email junk or anti-spam, we started out by just having an ad that said, here, buy this for both those words. But what I then found out is that those were 2 very different scenarios. When you searched for email junk, you were annoyed that you had so much email junk in your inbox. But you didn't know there was something called anti-spam filters yet. When you searched for anti-spam, you had identified there was a solution to your pain of receiving too much email junk. And the structure that was needed in the entire communication framework, not just the ad, but also the landing page, also possibly the emails that went out if you gave out a lead for a demo or something, all of that needed to be structured in a way more structured way than many do today. If you want to have the digital, automated communication, then you also need to understand that there are a lot of different questions you need to answer in that decision process. And this is why most, campaigns for B2B marketing fails, because they don't understand that you need 25 landing pages with 60 emails, with coherent 48 ads that are different and answers different questions in a buying journey for a B2B decision process.
Yeah, that makes sense. I went through a little bit of a journey there. I did start with just a generic, broad, and then like this doesn't work. So I just put on the hat, like what would I search for? So I did very specific like keywords and phrases, and then I created different landing pages depending on those keywords. So, for example, with SAS.co, like if someone said Salesforce renewal, then it was, are you renewing with your CRM? And then it was a landing page of, like typical timelines, for example, when do you need to engage with Salesforce in order to have the best possible outcome for everyone, right? Or if you have a CLAS, Salesforce Enterprise License Agreement, like that's the biggest bucket of contracts. And I had a specific one for that, and so I did there, but I did not have as many variations as you were talking about. And by the time I was trying to do it for more certainty, I was so fed up with it. So then I had fallen off a little bit, because it's also like, you have so many, you have a limited amount of time in a week, and then it's like, bootstrapping founder, then you're kind of like, okay, what am I focusing on? And well, I'm much better at cold calling and Google AdWords, so then that came in. So, but basically, where you think I may went wrong is that I didn't have specific keywords depending on where in the buying journey they were, and also replicating if I'm looking back, I probably was a little bit too salesy in the communication. It could have been maybe more of a nurturing, like trying to, instead of having a meeting booked saying like, do you want to have the white paper of 5 things you should think about, and then take it there and then put them into a nurturing journey, rather trying to convert them into a meeting in the beginning. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think what you should hear is that what you did with your understanding is, let's say you made 4 variants, different ads, different landing pages. You deep dived a little, and now you made a specific landing page for this CLAS or something else. Not necessarily you, but a normal complex decision process would need 10 million combinations of communication, because there's so many different decision makers in different stages that needs different answers. They have different questions. So the content here, it's not just about, then I have one ad, then I have one landing page to that ad. It's a millionfold. It's 1,000 million folds.
Yeah.
It's so so demanding to actually be relevant in a conversation you're not having, but you're having, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, it's what I'm also like a little bit curious about is almost like, it feels like you're getting, when people are doing these things, are you not necessarily getting the C-suite that is looking into this, because like, at least in my experience, they get involved in the later stages, so you have like maybe like a CRM director, or you have like a marketing manager, or you have someone, and then they have a product manager, and then they like gather, and then in the end they circulate the information to the executive team. But you're also saying that you should cater for the executive team in the case that they are getting into this information gathering. Okay.
That's when what you're talking about here is similar to account-based marketing, right?
Yeah.
So actually identifying your stakeholders, identifying their decision process, their needs, their pains, their gains, what information they need. In that tactic, you would want to identify, how do we ensure that the conversation around the table is about us? And you do that by ensuring that you are as relevant as possible to all these different decision makers that again have different needs in their decision, in their sales cycle.
Yeah.
And again, there will be some few executive stakeholders that are different to target. you are able to target them. We have previous experiences where we have done super high, highly targeted approaches to very specific high net worth individuals, so to say, or senior executives. But you have to target them with something completely different than the procurement manager or the function specialist that needs to uncover their needs. Yes, this product does this and this. Yes, it applies to all the compliance rules that we need to apply about. Yes, it's the most efficient, but also, yes, it's something that everyone is talking about. Also, I recognize this, and there's also the brand positioning in this, also for executives. So all of these things have to match up, for the decision process.
And I got this is a company that I got targeted by, because I have a new title now, right? I'm a C-level, now on LinkedIn, so all of a sudden I get much more emails in my inbox. And it was interesting because they were selling this. It sounded like a cool tool. It was like how to multiply your outreach with like personalized videos, and it like described the account homepage to make it relevant, and it basically cloned your voice, so you record one message and then it just like pushed out to hundreds of potential prospects and ICPs. Cool stuff, right? What I didn't understand was why the CEO didn't use that on me. Like, when you're selling me something, why aren't you? So like you just started a new software company. You've been in like the agency game for many years, and you're in the first year of this SaaS business. How far are you there, and are you using? Tell us what is it exactly that which problem are you solving, and are you using it yet on yourself?
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I had some colleagues, because we've been working for so many years with B2B marketing, complex B2B marketing, and we saw again and again when companies, they have the technology, when they have started collecting the data, again, the missing link here was creating enough content to actually feed those machines to be relevant. And that's the question, that's the challenge we saw again and again. So I had a colleague who sat down and said, like, listen, this Gen AI here is the solution to the content at scale, to the personalization at scale. So they sat down, a couple of colleagues of mine, and developed a machine based on OpenAI that integrates with other enterprise technologies such as Salesforce or Adobe, and then uses all the information. These big clients that we're working with, they have a lot of information already. They have hundreds of thousands of pages on the website. They have, tons of PDFs, often also hundreds of videos on YouTube. So, but they're not used in the structure and in the conversation that they would really like them to be used. So we've developed a tool called Magnety.ai, which is a personalization at scale tool that integrates with enterprise technologies, where we help these big companies be personal on a global level. So again, first off, obviously, ensuring that we get scale on campaigns. This is one of the biggest use cases that we're working with right now, is to ensure that we create campaigns faster, that we do it more efficiently, so that we minimize costs on, for instance, translations. Some of these companies we work with, they are 4 to 6 months in creating one campaign. We can boil that down so that they are way faster in doing this in a couple of months, or maybe even weeks. They are saving the entire cost around translation, because the engine translates and the content is super great, good quality. And I think, again, when looking at this, I can see this solves a lot of the communication at scale that companies have really needed. So using a machine to actually understand the business, but especially understanding the receiver, your ideal customer profile, understanding their pains, gains, needs, having one unified company tone of voice, understanding all the compliance rules that big companies have. Some of the companies we're working with, they have sent us like 90 pages on how you're allowed to use specific words. How on earth could a global marketing organization have any kind of scale in communication when they need to take 90 pages of compliance rules on how you use specific words into consideration?
Yeah.
That is part of why it takes so long. Then they need it translated. Then they need it, in a different machine, so it becomes an email or a LinkedIn post or a landing page. So that is the reason a campaign takes 6 months in a big global company.
This sounds great. Like this sounds like like one of the things that I get a little bit annoyed with when it comes to AI is that a lot of the tools are trying to sell me that they will replace it. Like I keep on saying like I don't need it to be replaced. Like if you can make me 10% or 20% better, that would be a massive improvement. And you going from months to potentially weeks is a lovely business case to present for the buying committee.
It is.
So what would you say is like now you're soon a year in, like what is the biggest challenge to get this to sell this?
Yeah. So first off, just going back to one of your previous questions, are we using the tool ourselves?
Yeah.
We are not yet, but we are in the process of building it to use it ourselves, because that's the classic. Why am I not receiving this relevant video from the guy who tries to sell me the AI video?
Yeah.
Why are you not using your own tool to do the content personalization at scale that you're trying to sell me? So we are definitely working on building our own foundation, learning our own tone of voice, with all the rules that we need to apply, and feeding it with an understanding on the personas that we are addressing.
Is it because that you're a little bit smaller than when you don't have the same volume as you will soon be in 40 different markets, of course, but like is that the bottleneck, that it takes a little bit longer than for the tool to learn, or what would you say?
I think the bottleneck right now is that we're 4 people.
Yeah.
Delivering actually on the sales that we have sold.
Yeah.
By now we have 7 customers, and they're big global customers in many markets, plus 70 markets. So there's a lot of actually customer success to ensure that people understands to use the platform and adopts the platform. We're receiving a lot of requests right now for different use cases. We started out by scaling on emails. We're getting requests on, can we also do landing pages? Yes, we can do landing pages. It's part of the system now. Can we do social media posts? Yes, we can do LinkedIn posts. We can do different kinds of channels as they are requested. We can build that in. Actually, we are having a current request right now. If we can build in personalization to Salesforce Marketing Cloud personalization, can we build in the fields that are needed to actually scale personalization? Yes, we can build that into the machine. So right now we're just working with the customers and developing based on the customer needs. And then, slowly starting, just as yourself, positioning ourselves to the stakeholders that we want to work with. So again, we have a pretty clear picture on our ideal customer profiles, on the target accounts that we are working, really well with. Having identified those, connecting with them on LinkedIn, positioning ourselves, creating content to make sure we're relevant, and actually also joining the conversation when we can see someone in these of the people that are our ideal customer profile, and we have a connection. We engage in conversations on LinkedIn and enrich those conversations as much as possible. But that's on a very manual, one-to-one way of doing things, just as you say yourself, that what the thing you're doing yourself, right?
So what is it that if you have a magic wand for your business right now, like what would you use it for? What has been the toughest?
It is the positioning, ensuring that enough people that are in your relevant target audience knows that you have a solution to many of the challenges they're working with. So it is reach right now for us. It's reach, and it's positioning. So actually making sure that we can have the conversation with the right people. That is what we spend our time with.
And what has been the most successful or effective way of doing that so far?
I would say actually just showcasing the solution. Every time when we are in a conversation with one of our ideal customer profiles, they see the solution, they are super happy and impressed about how simple their lives will be when they start working with this.
Yeah.
Again, because they know the pain of having to spend 6 months doing a campaign, and they want to spend their time doing other things than doing single send campaigns. They want to do more strategic work. They want to be more relevant. They want to develop a lot of more fantastic concepts, not spending 6 months developing an email campaign.
Agree, and same for me. Like every time I have a meeting with my ICP, they're like, "This makes sense," and then it's usually like, "It makes sense now," or "It makes sense in a bit," But it definitely. So that's at least then you have identified that you have an ICP, right? But how do you get in front of those? Like what tools are you using to actually send out that signal flares? They were like, "Hey, what's that?" And you have do you have that conversation?
Yeah, we're using primarily LinkedIn and a tool called Apollo IO to identify the target audiences. So identifying the types of companies we're scanning the companies for technologies when we can see they have, for instance, Adobe Marketo or Salesforce Marketing Cloud account engagement or engagement. And they're a global company, we can see this would be a good fit for us because we know they have the challenge that we are solving. We know that we can solve the scale part of their campaigns. So we identify them and we identify the profiles that work in the companies, find them, on LinkedIn, find them emails, phone numbers, but primarily currently LinkedIn. And then it's just, connecting to people, having like a 20% connection rate. Someone will accept your connection. At some point, you spot that they are, posting on LinkedIn on some great thing they're doing on their platform where we could contribute, and then we're engaging in that conversation.
So you're having a little bit of a almost a slow play on it. Like it's like, okay, I have identified these are the individuals. How many individuals per account do you usually add?
I guess it's around 10.
Yeah,
because it's normally global accounts, and it's difficult to see exactly who is on the central play. So often when we identify a company, we find, for instance, 10, 15 marketing automation managers or specialists or something like that. But they're often sitting in different countries and they're just focusing, as a country-specific user.
Yeah.
And we need to both, again, the account-based marketing approach, both show them how their daily work life can be easier and simpler, but also finding out who's actually working centrally to try and structure something, who is having the pain of ensuring that we can scale campaigns, who is having the pain of ensuring there will be, a company tone of voice, and then addressing that person, how we can help with other things, as for instance, a unified, compliant tone of voice, messaging, and then addressing the other people with what's relevant for them. Stop spending 2 months doing content creation. Start doing it in 2 minutes instead.
Which makes perfect sense. Like, but are you using then account-based marketing as a second step after this in LinkedIn engagement, or like how does the funnel kind of look like?
Yes, but in a very handheld way right now. So no systems. Yes, the targeting system in Apollo just to identify the accounts and the people, but we haven't set up our own we haven't set up our own funnel. We haven't set up our own customer insights on, decision processes on all of these things. We haven't taken our own medicine here yet.
Yeah, but it's also like you're so early, right? I'm feeling the same. Like I have Salesforce as CRM in the bottom. Then on top of that, I use Apollo as well. So as soon as I do all my prospecting in Apollo, and then as soon as I get an opportunity that is qualified, a lead that is like then qualified, I switched it from Apollo into Salesforce, and then I'm using a parallel dialer on top of that because cold calling, I'm a hammer, and cold calling is my nails. But I also have, Pardot or Salesforce engagement. I'm part of my system. I just haven't switched it on yet. But I'm just like, it's also like this again, the time, and I don't have the capacity to do it. Like I just have
and you probably don't have the volume in permissions.
No,
where it actually makes sense as a cost benefit approach, right?
Okay, so what volume is it I should?
I mean, if you have 10 people in your, leads list, I don't know, 100 people, I don't know. It takes a lot of effort to create the content and build the engagements in Pardot, in Engagement Studio, and develop all the content that is created. So again, it doesn't make sense on that. Level.
So it's like when you have built a list of emails that is big enough for you to like, okay, if I can convert 2% of this list, then then it starts making sense. But like that's something that would be like a good rule of thumb then to look at when you start with a tool like that. Okay, that does make sense. It's you've been a founder for basically your entire career, like that's so like how do you look at prioritization, and like how do you like do you have any frameworks for what to prioritize in your day-to-days or in your week-to-weeks?
I would go back to the rule of thumb, as I mentioned a couple of times during this conversation about the volume and value.
Yeah.
To look at so where can I actually find some kind of volume? Is it participating in an event? I know there will probably be volume because I can see the specific event has 1,000 attendees, and 70% of them will be my ideal customer profile. Then that is definitely something I would engage in. Looking at keywords, can I identify enough keywords where there's actually some value? It's like when you do a keyword research for instance, Google Ads, you also look at the value, on the volume, and see if this has a search volume on 10 per month, then it might not be, feasible for me to start targeting Google Ads and landing pages and lead collections and ongoing conversations through Pardot. Might be too much work.
Yeah.
Because currently I just need the conversation, and I think that's part of, like I hear you're doing as well, the outreach, the conversation. I have spent the last 15 years in this industry, so I know a lot of people already, and it's a much manual outreach to just make sure to have the conversations with the companies that are relevant for us right now.
It's I was talking to another founder here the other day, and he was saying that everybody is having the same challenge. It's basically the outreach and getting in front of people, and it's also fun to see some people that has been in big corporations like myself that has developed certain skill sets, right, to survive in big organizations, which is completely different from how to survive as an entrepreneur. Like it's the political game that you need to know when you're in a big corporation is different from when you're a company of two or 4. And also just the emotional roller coaster is definitely more volatile in a smaller environment where your every action has consequences, right? If you would go back to Sebastian when he was starting out this entrepreneurial journey, is there anything would you whisper in his ears? Because obviously, like, our mistakes and successes forms us. So it's not necessarily that you want to change anything, but would it be something that you would whisper in his ear to be to look out for?
I would say, and it actually it breaks with my entire person and my career path. I would say start learning to sell more. Sell. Actually, one of the best educations I could imagine given my kids are being like phone sellers for insurances or something like that, because you really get the basics on understanding just to keep trying. Get so many no's, but just keep trying and actually have a conversation with people. And that part is what I have learned, and where I started with digital marketing was not to have a conversation with people. I have learned afterwards that I'm trying to replicate a conversation, but it's a digital conversation where I'm not part of it. It's a machine that does it. And I structure a lot of, communication and hope it resonates to the receiver. But what actually creates the value is the conversation, is the relation. And that is definitely something, if I were to go back and whisper in my own ear or tell my kids, it would be to learn to sell more.
Yeah.
Just pick up the phone or, approach people, talk to people in the supermarket, talk to people. Just like talking to people and use that.
Be curious,
as a
right?
superpower.
Yeah, being curious is, but it's also like I was saying to my wife the other day that I hope that my kids will be the curious type, because my life will be very easy then, because then I'm very curious. Then we can be curious together. But like as we said in maybe before we recorded, like kids are like Pokemon cards. Like you get some traits, and that's then you have to just work with those traits. But I have to catch myself when this insurance company salesperson is calling, because I get very frustrated on how bad they are. The last time they called, I was having a question about our travel insurance, and they're like, "No problem, everything, you have the highest. Don't worry, have a nice trip." And then he's like, "By the way, I see here you don't have the life insurance with us." And I'm already halfway out through the door, so I don't want to engage in this, right? So I'm like, yeah, it's all good. My wife takes care for all these things. Bye. And then afterwards, I'm like, why didn't he just ask 2 questions? Like he could have asked, so you're going away now on a trip with your wife and your kids. He already has that data. Are you the sole provider or the biggest, earner in your household? Yes. Have you and your wife talked about if, anything, hopefully not, but if something happens, how will you ensure that your wife and your kids has the same, life that they have today? Actually, I haven't talked about that. Well, I see that you don't have the life insurance here with us. It's only, 10 kroners a month extra, and then you can live happily knowing that if something hopefully not happens to you, at least your wife doesn't have to sell the house. And I'm like, so but every time you as a salesperson talk to this younger salesperson, you have to just check yourself that you're not becoming a douchebag and like, hey, is that how you sell? This is how you sell.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think it's being a good person, I actually like giving the feedback. Everything from, you should really change your phone because I can't hear you, to giving that information. Listen, if you had approached me like this, that would have been really, really good of you. I often actually spend time giving feedback. I also often just say no, save your time. I'm not the right one. Move on to the next. But in some situations, I give the feedback.
I do too, but every time I do, I feel like that guy in Boiler Room when he's like, is this a sales pitch? Are you trying to sell me your newspaper? And I do also give feedback, but I do every time feel a little bit shamed about it. It's like not. It's living outside the comfort zone. I think it's like one of the frameworks that I'm having, and every time I'm being too comfortable is usually when I don't push enough. Like if I feel like it's a little bit, there's some friction here, like there's some resistance in doing this, then there's usually a northern star that if I walk towards that resistance, good things happen. Like if I, like, because maybe it's a big deal, if it's a big account, I feel a bit nervous about that. Then okay, well, if you're not picking up the phone and trying to call the CIO, I'm definitely not going to have a conversation with them, or whatever it might be. And now I've been doing uncomfortable things for so many years because that's what sales is. So every time I do feel that there is something resistance, then I'm like, this is an interesting feeling. I usually don't get nervous. And I've been a lot more nervous the last 2 years than I've been the previous 10. So it's a nice vibe. Do you listen more to podcast, or do you read more? What are you, a podcast guy or a book guy?
I'm a read guy, not a book guy, not a podcast guy. I only have a short transit to work, so I don't really get to deep dive into podcasts. When I work, I listen to music a lot, so I really deep dive zone to music. But I read awful lot every day. Primarily LinkedIn inspiration from people I follow. Figuring out what's trending, what's the direction, which conversation should we engage in, and then I read a lot about just as a salesperson. Again, I read a lot about the people that I want to sell something to. What are they engaging in? What are they commenting on? I use that in conversations. So yeah.
Is there anything that you've seen? Is there any trends that you're seeing now that on LinkedIn? Because I shifted my LinkedIn from my feed to be relevant to timeline, because then I see a lot more things that doesn't get so much likes. So it's like and contacts and connections that I might haven't spoken with for a long time. Whereas when I have the relevance feed, then it's usually the big ones, like the ones with the biggest following that I keep on seeing. But have you seen any trends in your LinkedIn that is obvious for you that might not be obvious for the listeners?
I think definitely the kind of like drip campaigns on LinkedIn, really structuring your outreach and approach. I get that from a lot of different people. I see they're using tools like Apollo or Dripify for actually sequencing conversations on LinkedIn. Most of them are doing it bad. So it's irrelevant for me. I don't have the specific need, and then it just becomes spam. Very few are doing it really good, where they actually engage in the conversation, and there is a product market fit from what they're selling to my interest, which makes it a relevant conversation and a pleasant conversation, even though someone is sliding into my DM or having a conversation on my comments. But I can see where it works. It's because it's relevant, and I think we'll see a lot more on that, especially using LinkedIn. And then also what goes on behind the scenes for tools like LinkedIn, where you pick up, use the tracking scripts and actually pick up the cookies and are able to segment based on your behavior on LinkedIn. For instance, if people have seen 20 seconds of this video, then put them in the segment where they are most likely to react next time. And then maybe sponsor your content to those people that have engaged something.
So and that's something you do within the LinkedIn advertisement studio?
Yes.
Okay.
And that is the complexity that most don't work with. It is understanding, again, the time sequence and picking up the data points, being data-driven, actually picking up the data points, pushing people into different segments, and having a lot of different content to those specific segments. So you keep pushing people in a conversation that will be relevant for them. And very few actually works with the platforms to do that, because it's super complex and you really have to structure your data and your segmentation and your content that you need to position.
I feel like it's such like I want to do these things, but I guess I'm maybe just too small yet. Like, do you think I'm too small?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is, campaigns like this. Just setting up campaigns. Some of the campaigns we've done for big B2B marketeers, a campaign like this is easily $500,000.
Yeah.
Just in time setting up.
Are we talking euros? Or
No. This is at least Danish kroners.
Okay, so
Yes,
what's that? That's 70,000 euros.
Yeah, prox.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thoughts that needs to be structured. Also, one thing is to actually structure everything segmentation wise, picking up the right data, but also the concept itself. What do I actually, again, uncoding the decision process you're communicating to, figuring out what does what's a sales process, how does it look like, and how can I uncover it and design the communication needed to structure in my platform.
But is it anything that, because I good that I'm too small, then I don't have to worry about this anymore. But it's like, I remember also a lot of the times we said like, okay, but let's switch on the switch so we collect data, for example, and stuff like that. Is that something like, can you collect if you have like should you have like some kind of LinkedIn cookie, or like, is there anything of those that should be implemented now, even though that you're not big enough? So when you're reaching a bit of scale, that you at least have some data to look back on. Is that something that I should is that a thing, or?
It definitely is. But again, if you look at the effort needed to do that, because you probably also need your tag management system, for instance, Google Tag Manager, that then owns all data collection and puts all the tags. You need that in place. Then you need your LinkedIn tracking code. Then you also need your partner tracking code. Then you also need so now you're looking at needing to connect 5-7 different platforms and ensuring you have the different scripts updated and placed. It's definitely relevant to do if you want to do anything that is just nearly data driven. You need to have this, but it's as being a small company, difficult.
Yeah, because I now I've at least graduated to the point where I realized that I shouldn't do everything myself. Like, that's so. But I did install the Google ad tracker on my website, and I linked it to all different things, and it's like, and had spent like hours on trying to figure that out. It's just a waste of time instead of having someone to do it for me. But like, I guess that's the learnings of a first-time founder. Like, that's why you should always invest in second-time founders. Like, they've been punched in the face a couple of times. So yeah, like I'm looking forward to figuring some of this out. But okay, that's cool. How did maybe we don't want to touch about that, but how did the founding conversation go?
So we've had some funding conversations. I think the difficult space here is that we're not a typical VC case because we're enterprise platforms. I think the concerns around scalability is something that many VCs are having a challenge with in our specific situation, because it is really big contracts, really big clients. Right now we're looking at a super big German company with 7 brands. They're looking at this for 5 or 6 different use cases: translation, personalization, email, landing pages, sales emails. It's a long sales cycle, so it's really difficult to put into a spreadsheet that we can triple, double, for instance.
Yeah.
because it's an unclear sales process right now.
Yeah.
That is sales led, founder led.
Yeah.
So that is part of the resistance we are facing. Also, I think there's still hesitance in actually understanding the cognitive architecture layer on working with, for instance, Gen AI applications. So there's the infrastructure, which is the hardware, NVIDIA. Then there's the models like OpenAI, and then there's the entire cognitive architecture layer on top of that. How can we actually apply this in specific situations? And for many, it still seems like this is a thin layer. They really like NVIDIA, they really like OpenAI or similar, but the layer on top of that, it seems thin layered for many. So I think
they're worried about the moat. Is that
yes, exactly, the moat. So they're still hesitant in terms of how strong and how you're able to build your moat. And I think we as a company we have a great moat, especially again with the experience we come from and the things that we're building into our engine to actually uncover the complex decision process. So it's not just an API call, to OpenAI that then brings the content you would actually just be able to bring in your own OpenAI. But it's a complete understanding on a complex decision process, which is, reasoning, understanding a decision process, which is part of what we're building in our mode. That is what we need to simplify. Right now, we have 60 pages of white paper on how we're going to build it. We have prototypes. We have super complex blueprints, but we haven't nailed the simplified, sales pitch on why this is the great mode.
And I think like there, I said, I had a recording with Michael from Antler here last week, and we talked about this as well. And then like Sam Altman was saying that there's two types of companies, right? The ones that are excited about next OpenAI release, and the ones that are worried about it. And like you guys are clearly excited about it because you're like, when they come with something new, your products gets better,
yes,
and then your moat becomes bigger. It's like an acceleration, right? But also
the product becomes better. The moat doesn't necessarily.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it become like an inflection point where it's like kind of, the faster you grow, then your moat gets further away from the others, because like then
not as long as it's based on the capabilities that OpenAI brings us, because everyone will have those capabilities.
But you are building on top of that as well, right? So and the faster, the longer you're in the market, the wider the distance from. Then obviously, if someone comes with unlimited resources, maybe they can catch up, right? But it's
So what we're building that will build a mode here is the feedback loops on how things actually resonate. So how are people engaging?
The data,
the click-to-open rate, the engagement rates, all of these things are feedback loops we're bringing back into the machine, figuring out this works, this doesn't work. But also, as I say, uncoding different kinds of industries, like actually figuring out what is the decision process for energy solutions, for clean energy, in different, for different industries, really figuring out windmills, how does that work? Okay, now we figured out how does the decision process work for windmills. Many others haven't found out because they focus on, how can I sell more books? How can I sell more makeup? We identify and build a machine that figures out how can we send more energy solutions.
And that would be amazing when, like you have 7 clients now, which is fantastic, but it's also like in the beginning, and a lot of times, from a sales team perspective, like if you have less than 15 clients, the CRO or the VP of sales is always going to be a little bit nervous because it's like, okay, you how many of these 7 is your contact, your Rolodex, right? Have you figured this out? And I'm, like when you have 15 clients, which you will have, then you will be much further down that funnel and be easier to articulate why for this is going to scale in the way to the VCs as well, right? It's like I think it's like really cool because it's such a complex problem, and then when you have 15 clients, then you're also starting to see some templates, right? So then the third or the fourth or the fifth client or the 20th or the 100th in that vertical will have a much shorter time to value because you already done it so many times. Okay, green energy, click. You're this one. I think that's super cool. Like that is a great moat.
And then that is where you go from having to scale from being founder led to sales led. Actually, developing a playbook, making sure someone else understands what words to say, how to do a demo, how to follow up, all of these things. Then there's the challenge in that scale part of scaling yourself from founders, doing a sale, and if we can't sell this technology, no one can sell this. So obviously we should be able to sell it. But then scaling yourself to making sure a sales team can sell this, that's the first challenge in that. And that's part of what we want to, prove in this funding round that we're looking for to actually scale from being founder-led to being sales-led.
Absolutely. So who's your dream client?
Right now, we're actively pitching on a company like Ericsson. That would definitely be a dream client. Global, big brands, global brands that most people know, but with very complex products.
Looking forward to see that logo update in a couple of months' time, Sebastian. Thank you for taking the time and sitting down.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
That's the pod.